Oh man, these days are always so crazy recording all of these videos about Nintendo Direct information. But today I want to speak a little bit more about all of the different announcements and what they mean specifically for the Nintendo Switch 2, because there were so many hidden messages behind every single announcement. Starting off with just the release dates. Obviously, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond did not get a release date. Tamagotchi Life Living the Dream also did not get a release date. Rhythm Heaven also did not get a release date. They were all slated for 2026, and of course Metroid Prime 4 was slated for 2025 later this year, but there were no release dates, and I find that to be very interesting because the Switch 2 Direct obviously is on April 2nd, and all of the information for that console and its games will be there, and probably a lot of games and release dates for this year. The Nintendo Switch, this tells me, will be around for another year and a half at least. The Nintendo Switch is not going anywhere. Nintendo does not want to abandon the user base, the 150 million plus people that bought Switches. They want to make sure, they want to make certain that the people who buy Switches day one, Switch 2's day one, they go to the store, they buy it, they can switch their games up if they want, and then the people from the original console, if they don't feel like buying day one, or they just don't have the funds to buy it day one, they don't want to feel like all of a sudden, boom, whenever this thing launches, your Switch 1 is irrelevant now. They don't want you to feel that way. So the release dates really tell a lot about their ideology, how they want to handle the Switch moving forward, and to be honest, it is very similar to the 3DS, how they handled that at the beginning of the Switch 1's life. That console was given like a year and a half to 2 years of segments in actual Nintendo Directs saying, hey, this is a 3DS game coming this year, this is a 3DS game coming this month, blah blah blah. Samus Returns is always the game that comes to my mind that released on the 3DS. Then the Luigi's Mansion remake. That game also released on the 3DS rather than the Nintendo Switch. There was also a Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story game that released on the 3DS. And the common thread between all of those games is that none of them succeeded. And that is what I don't want to see on the Switch 1, but it at least says, hey, we want to give you guys more content. We don't want to abandon you. So it's more of a goodwill thing than anything. And also, the difference between the Switch and the 3DS, and to why I think Nintendo is more confident releasing Switch 1 games with the Switch 2 around the corner, is that it's backwards compatible. And that moves into my next point. The actual games on the Switch 1 and the Switch 2, we know will be backwards compatible. We will be able to pick up our Switch 2's day one and immediately have access to the entire library from the Switch. That is amazing, but a lot of people didn't know how that was going to work. We just kind of figured it would be how it was in the past. From the Wii to the Wii U, you just transfer your stuff over, or you just have one digital copy, so that way you can play it on all your consoles. But Nintendo has introduced a complicated and very Nintendo-like solution, quote unquote, to actually have backwards compatible games. Now, the way that they have introduced this idea is called a virtual game card. Why they don't say digital, I don't know, because it's applying only to digital games. With your physical games, you can take them in and out of your system, or systems if you have multiple, and you just play that game on your system. And they say, hey, this is a better way to be a little bit more flexible if you have multiple systems, and to just use your game. So what if we could do that for digital games as well? And they're thinking, all right, instead of just making it to where if you have the same account on multiple systems and all that nightmare stuff, because as you know, if you have multiple Switches, there has to be one primary Switch that is set up as the primary one, and you play that, and if you go to the other one, you have to have internet connection to then move the primary source over to that, or just have access to the account to know that you can play it on that system. So it's a very complicated process, but this is trying to ease that process a little bit, especially with the Switch 2 and backwards compatibility coming up. So the way they're marketing this is that you have virtual game cards that are on this part of your home page. You click on that, all of your digital games will be there in somewhat of a digital card form as if you had a physical copy of that game. Then you can pick which ones you want to play, which ones you want to load onto your console, and which ones you want to eject off of the console. So the way they want to market this is like, this is digital if you buy only digital, but it works the same as physical games. So it makes it a lot easier, hopefully, for you to have a Switch 2 and then also have your Switch 1 and move those games over to that console. Now, the best part about this that is really slipping through the cracks for a lot of people, when you have two Switches locally, like your Switch 2 and then your Switch 1, and you want to do this, you want to eject and transfer to your other console, it is so much easier than it was prior with multiple Switch 1s, and that system I explained earlier. This system is simply you locally connect for the first time, and then boom, you are connected. Once you are connected, you will then be able to switch games back and forth at ease whenever you want. You don't have to connect to that console locally ever again once you do it that first time. And if you have a family plan with the Nintendo Switch Online, which makes me wonder if this feature is only available to people who purchase Switch Online, you can play multiple games on multiple consoles with multiple people. So if you bought one game, if I bought Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and I completely beat the game, I finished it, I'm done with it, and my brother wants to play it, and I don't want to give him my Switch, in that case, you can then load it over to his console. The only downside here is that you can only do this for 14 days, and then it will automatically go back to your system. Now, the only reason I can think of to why this is such a strict limit is because, hey, if I bought my game and you don't send it back over, like if you're trying to essentially steal it from me digitally, that 14-day mark gives me the game back. I would assume after that 14-day mark, I can just send it back to you, and then you can pick up where you left off, and then you get 14 more days to play it, and vice versa. I am a little weary that you wouldn't be able to pick up where you left off, that if I transfer it to your console and you play it, I don't know how that works, but I kind of think that maybe you would only have 14 days to do what you want to do, and then if you just don't get it done, then you might have to start from scratch, which would really suck. But for your actual Switch 2 to Switch 1 connection, which is what a lot of people I think would be most worried about here, this seems to be a pretty seamless process in which you can play Switch 1 games on your Switch 2. And to be honest, once I get all of those games over to my Switch 2, I am very, very likely just going to stick with those on that console. It's very, very rare that I would ever want to take it back to my Switch 1, so I'm not super worried about it, unless I just wanted to play in handheld mode and I wanted my OLED screen, because we know the Switch 2 does not have OLED at this moment. They might come out with another rendition of the console later with a Switch 2 OLED version, but for now, there's no reason I personally see as to why I would ever want to put it back on my original Switch. Now, I explained all of that process just in case you didn't know what it was or hadn't seen it yet, so now that you know what this virtual game card process looks like, let me tell you the implications it has for the Switch 2 outside of the obvious, which is just backwards compatibility. Well, first of all, they kind of slipped up here because on their website, they are explaining how it works, they're explaining the fine print and all that, and it says compatible systems must be linked to a Nintendo account to use virtual game cards. So you have to at least have an account, but it doesn't seem to me that you have to have a Switch Online account. Moving on, it says the Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive games and Nintendo Switch 2 Edition games can only be loaded on a Nintendo Switch 2 system. Now, this is a huge, huge deal because this essentially confirms to us, and Nintendo is probably kicking themselves here for this fine print, we are officially now confirmed to be getting Switch 1 games enhanced for the Switch 2. If you have been around long enough, you would know I have been clamoring since the very beginning of my channel's existence that Breath of the Wild will be getting an enhanced version on the Nintendo Switch 2, and now we know the official terminology for it. It will be Breath of the Wild Switch 2 Edition. Now, I don't know if this means they are going to be giving us actual brand new $70 games in which we have to buy all of the old games again for just a little bit better graphics. I don't think that's the case. In fact, I think the word edition here is the key word that is telling us everything about what this game would be like. Breath of the Wild Switch 2 Edition means to me that it's probably just an upgrade. Now, whether or not you have to pay for that upgrade, I don't know. In fact, I would probably say yes, you would probably have to pay a little bit for that, but maybe there's a chance if you already own the game on Switch 1, they just give you the Switch 2 Edition for free. And if that were to be the case, then I assume they will have an eShop on the Switch 2 in which you can buy, yes, Switch 1 games and just have those regular games and not even get them up-resed, but you will probably also have the option to buy an upgraded version of that Switch 1 for $70. So if you already have Breath of the Wild, you don't have to worry about it, or you'll have to pay $5 to $10 for the upgrade. If you don't have Breath of the Wild and you want to buy the Switch 2 edition, you'll probably spend $70 doing so, and if you want to try to find some loophole there, you could buy it on sale or on eBay or whatever, and then pay just a little bit for that upgrade. Either way, Nintendo is getting money out of it, and either way, the consumer is getting a better experience of that game on their brand new hardware. You can just hear them internally screaming at us, "We are trying to make this as easy as possible for you. We want you to enjoy the Switch 2 just as much as the Switch 1. We want you to love all things Nintendo, and we don't want you to worry about anything." So this is really them trying to tell us, we're here for you. Don't worry and buy a Switch 2. Please buy a Switch 2. For the love of God, buy a Switch 2. That is what I am hearing from this. That is what they're trying to communicate to those with Switch 1s. Which is a perfect segue into my next point, which is that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is absolutely getting a Switch 2 edition, and I would bet a lot of money it will be at the Switch 2 Direct coming on April 2nd. This trailer was a little bit more information of the game. They wanted to make sure that we saw more about it, what the game looked like, and by the way, the game is gorgeous. It is drop dead gorgeous. Retro Studios truly has not lost a step, and the game looks phenomenal, and I can only imagine how much better it's going to look on the Switch 2 with its Switch 2 edition. So now that we've confirmed that Switch 2 editions are a thing, that they will be coming, why do I think Metroid Prime 4 Beyond will specifically get a Switch 2 edition, and what does that mean for all of the other Switch 1 games? Which ones will get Switch 2 editions? Will they all get Switch 2 editions? How do we upgrade them? Will they come all at once, or will they drip feed them to us? Well, honestly, I really hope they don't drip feed them to us, and those are a lot of questions, so you need to calm down and just listen for a second, okay? Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is absolutely getting a Switch 2 edition. Why? Well, first of all, Metroid has never, historically speaking, been a high-selling series, and Nintendo wants to change that. They want to give it the limelight. They want it to be something bigger. And I really do think with the Switch 2, it can be bigger by being a launch title. Or if not a launch title, at least come very, very close to the Switch 2. Whether that be releasing before the console itself or just a little bit after, it needs to be there early, and it needs to have a lot of attention given to it for being one of the best looking games at launch. Because this game already looks phenomenal in this trailer on a compressed YouTube video. How much better do you think it's going to look on the Nintendo Switch 1? And then how much better do you think it's going to look on the Nintendo Switch 2 with a specific edition for that console? Another thing about this trailer is that it showed off a lot of cool things, but it reeks of not yet shown everything. That means they have absolutely not told us every single thing about this game or about what is different about it. The psychic abilities are huge, but they also teased that brand new suit that Samus wears, and they showed off some cutscenes with some actual dialogue that are very reminiscent of Metroid Dread's cinematic style and just everything that game oozed with charisma and charm, and Samus just being cool. But my main point here is that I really do think with that new suit, with a lot of these little cutscenes that we've seen, with these cinematic boss fights, I really think Nintendo is hiding the vast majority of what is amazing about this game, and we will see even more of it at the Switch 2 Direct. But to be honest, there is also a small chance that they don't show it at the Switch 2 Direct at all. I could see them really focusing on Breath of the Wild getting a Switch 2 edition, Tears of the Kingdom maybe getting a Switch 2 edition, all of these other first-party Switch 1 games, and then this is also a part of that sizzle reel that they barely show for like 5 seconds. Maybe that's the case. This to me seems like Nintendo's answer to other first-person shooter games in the genre and across the industry that a lot of people like, and to be honest, if those games sell so insanely well, games like Halo, why in the world could Metroid not also be up there with the big boys? Another question that pops up from this Switch 2 edition talk and Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is, will they have physical editions of those Switch 2 editions? Will they just be digital only, since a lot of these games will be on the Switch 1 and they will have had a lot of physical copies out in the wild for a very long time, like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe? I'm sure any store you go to will have a bunch of copies of that game. Does it make sense for them to also flood the market with a bunch more Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Switch 2 editions alongside of the Mario Kart for Switch 2? No, I don't think so. In fact, I think to avoid confusion altogether, they are not going to market the Switch 2 versions in any any sort of physical capacity at all, just to keep all of the moms and dads away from Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And if they just so happen to buy it anyways, or any other Switch 1 game for that fact, and they get to the Switch 2 and go, oh no, this is not the upgraded version, I think Nintendo will have it to where once you put it in, it will send you a little notification or an email or whatever saying, if you want, you can spend $5-10 more and you can get it upgraded to the Switch 2 version to get the most out of your hardware and the best experience. So honestly, all of this will stay completely digital, and I think that was another reason why they introduced those virtual game cards and why that is going to be incredibly important moving forward. You're probably going to have the upgraded version completely and totally replace the Switch 1 icon, maybe have some sort of Switch 2 edition icon that they put on the little bottom or top of every single game, and then once you go to that card spot on the home page, you can just click on whichever one you want, transfer it back and forth, or just play it right then and there. The next part of this that has Switch 2 implications is Nintendo Today. Miyamoto came out, he said, hey, we got a new app for you. It's called Nintendo Today, and it's us being extremely clear with you about what's going on. It's an app that every single day after the Switch 2 Direct, it will give us a brand new piece of information, and it's kind of Nintendo's Twitter. It'll just give us new information drops every single day. It's one of those things I'll check every day for a while, and if there's nothing cool, then I'll probably not look at it except for maybe once a week. But I could see this being similar to Smash Bros. Brawl, how back in the day, Sakurai made it to where you'd go on the website and every single day it would be either some new item or some weird picture or literally revealing Sonic to be a playable character on the website. It's either going to be a bunch of nothing or a bunch of big stuff, and I really hope that it's a little bit in between there, because I don't want to have to see a huge piece of information on my phone about something that they could have told me within the Direct. I just hope that if there is cool information coming onto this app, it isn't too exclusive to the app, that we get it in the Direct, that we understand it moving forward. But also, I think it could be cool if there are game reveals or some other sort of reveal that happens on this app later on in the future. Imagine if there was some sort of spin-off game or third-party game that was announced on this app. That would be really cool and would obviously keep us coming back and keep us invested in general. The movies, all of the theme parks, Alarmo, the music app, Nintendo has been stretching their legs past video games and into different markets and different genres of entertainment. Nintendo wants to make sure that even if the Switch 2 flops, even if their video game part of the world has a struggle like the Wii U did, they can depend on other forms of media and brand recognition to keep them afloat for the long haul. And I also truly believe that Nintendo is a company that believes in their fans being happy and making good products that actually improve our lives. They are trying to take that next step forward to make our lives even better. This could be just Nintendo propaganda here, and maybe it is, but I really do believe they are different than other companies. They truly care about us more than the average company would, and they want us to have a good time with their products and for our lives just to be better. The proof is in the pudding, my friends, so thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. Make sure you like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and also click my notification bell to know exactly when I release all of my videos. I have a ton in the pipeline, especially considering next week's Switch 2 Direct. I am probably going to absolutely shatter my record for most videos in a week and a half. And if you want to see a bunch of my scripted videos that I already have done, click on my membership program in the description below to join. Couple bucks a month to help support the channel and get early access to all my videos, Discord servers, badges, you name it. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. I love you and I appreciate you so much. Make sure you have yourself a phenomenal day. My name is Ray. This has been Ray's Nintendo Talk, and I will see you all in the next video.